Hampshire. Because if you are going to advocate publicly for a political agenda, you have to have a list of members. You have to be a contactable organization. You can't just, send out, mailing saying, I'm the No Dogs on the Street committee, or, whatever it is that is your position. This is my understanding. I checked it with one of our selectmen, with Joel, and he confirmed that that was in fact what happened, but we can ask him to come and explain it more. But I think, I think it's important that everyone who isn't resident of Alstead knows that they can not only attend these meetings, they can join this committee. If they have positions on the budget, they should join.
At least come and be heard.
And this is the way to get your voice heard. So, I don't see that people should see us as intimidating. We're just your neighbors, that's all.
I think if I can just wrap up one thing, and this is to Donna's point, somehow we agreed on virtually everything. Is it that far of a stretch to think that the selectmen working with you guys through the process, not, ahead of or behind of, or as we go through this, can't do the same? I'm really optimistic. I think we can hammer some things out. There's gonna be some things that we just don't agree on. That's gonna be a fact. And maybe the selectmen's budget at the end, there's a couple line items that you guys don't like, think should be higher or lower. Feel free to propose something. That's gonna be how it's gonna work. That's how it's always worked.
Well, I think that we met our mandate pretty well. I think we ruffled some people's feathers at the end by, as Marge pointed out, having a special place to sit and a kind of a special role at the deliberative session. And I think also the fact that some of the figures that we wanted to see in the budget went beyond the 3% cap, and I think that burned some people, and they thought that we had overstepped our authority or our mandate or whatever. But I think aside from those two things, I think we worked closely with whatever was happening, as cumbersome and as stumbling as the process was for all of us last year. We did work pretty well together. You being the select board had our ear and we had yours, and
the 3% cap is a selectman's cap.
right,
It is not a town's.
right.
It's not the town's cap. It's not an individual person's cap.
And,
Right.
and in fact, it was voted on at the deliberative session, and the town agreed that 3% cap was not gonna cut it
Last year.
last year.
But I think that bothered some people.
They lost, they were on the losing side, I mean, it's democracy,
It
come
was,
on.
it was close to the deliberative session, but when you look at the overall vote on that budget, it was by a 2-to-1 margin that thing passed. And I think that says something there in terms of what the townspeople thought.
I suggest that we continue to work as conscientiously as we have and as we intend to, and when it comes time for the meetings, we'll figure out the proper places to sit and how we're going to present our dissent if we have it. And
You'll have to get us a list of crowns. Is it a tiara? Who wants to wear the tiaras?
I have
The
one.
high?
I can bring mine.
Maybe the bishop's tall hat. I'm. Last year to me was a learning experience. We went through it.
There's still a lot of work.
We ruffled some feathers. This year it's a little bit different group of people.
It's different
and
feathers.
We got different
Different
issues to address, and we'll address them.
yeah,
But with our additional organization, I guess, this year, feet on the ground, the feet having been on the ground longer, whatever, however you want to put it, then I think we're here to help, to advise the selectmen. What we need to do is have that time for us to meet with the selectmen to meet with us, so that we can reach a consensus. I mean, that is the goal, is that there is only one budget that goes in, and it is done by looking at everything that needs to happen. Now, if we as a budget committee, again, find that that 3% just, doesn't work, I mean, we weren't over by more than 0.5% or something, I mean, it wasn't like we were way over 3%, but that if we find that the selectmen are being held to this 3%, yet as an advisory committee, we think that something else needs to happen, I think it is our duty to advise and to put out a budget that we think is needed for
Propose
the
it to
town.
the voters and let the voters
Yeah.
decide.
And if it's lower, we need to do that too. If we think that the budget has,
That would be cool.
the selectmen have gone too high, they didn't need to go to 3%, then we need to propose that as well. But anyway,
The biggest concern I have is that the communication is back and forth on a regular basis, and I would urge people who, are on subcommittees when that department head is gonna be at the select board meetings to go, so you hear things for yourself, and so that, it's not on Chris's shoulders to make sure things get reported back. And I just had the feeling, I came away with a couple of feelings from that meeting last night, which was a marathon meeting, both in terms of the number of people there and the length of it. I think I got home about 8:30. One was the communication back and forth, and two was the fact that one of the other things that caveat that came up was the HR committee, I guess, is due to submit their report by the end of the month. There may be some recommendations in that have an impact on the budget, so, and that, may put things in a different light, so. I got the feeling in terms of I don't know necessarily in terms of staffing, but some of the suggestions they may have, may cause us to look at things a little differently, so. Whether or not that happens next year or not, I don't know, so. Bob wouldn't give me any sneak previews, he just kind of laughed at a comment that I made and basically said, wait till you see the report, so. Which made me think that has the potential to, be another line item, and if it's a good line item, then that's something we need to consider, so.
Okay.
That's what they're there for.
Any other discussion on this? Are you satisfied with how we've?
The feeling in the room is what?
I
We're
would
not
throw out,
making any
just
changes.
to that last point about getting together, I mean, if we did something like, okay, David started out, and then we have Kim, and we have, Jesse or whoever, and we go through that first round. Maybe after that first round, there's a second round that we go through, and all your committee people, subcommittee people are at those selectmen's meetings. And then after, so that's 4 weeks, and then the next 4 weeks, maybe selectmen, and we meet with each subcommittee, or we meet with you over each one, and maybe it's all the selectmen, or as many as who can make it.
Some towns do marathon budget sessions, like I know where we used to live on a Saturday. The finance committee and the selectmen would sit down and they'd hash out the budget.
That's not a bad idea.
And with everybody in the same room.
Remind me, it seems to me like DPW came up with whatever, and then we talked about it, and then something else, and and then we all had to vote on whether we agreed with that subcommittee, right? So I'm just seeing this as being, the timing may not fit, or unless we pick a day where it's all gotta get done, and we all get together and wham it through.
Well, if we get together, say we do that like 4-week plan, we get together and we realize that we're this far apart, well, then it's gonna be not go your separate ways and go back to the drawing board, but that's, I think, when you need the selectmen and the department head and the subcommittee to sit down and work really, really hard to figure out what we're gonna go forward with. That identifies the pain points. If we hit, ambulance Jesse, and it is what it is, and everybody likes it, and we're good, done. That part of the budget's done. But if we run into something in DPW, then that to me is a point to sit down and hash it out. I love the idea of a marathon, lock us all in the gymnasium, with 6
Pizza.
bottles of water and pizza, and that's it. And don't come out until it's done, but maybe we can use that sort of a process to narrow down to the points of.
But if we don't even know what's coming up, who's presenting next?
Well, that would be a good
We
thing
need the
to know.
calendar. Remember when Juliana last year said, this is what I do with my dance students, my dance troupe? We have so many weeks, so
Yeah,
let's count it back.
yeah.
I wanna know, we're gonna need a new line item for the pizza.
Oh, I'm finding out it's
Or do
like,
we have to pay for our own pizza?
I think we have that somewhere. It may not say
Okay,
pizza.
let's wrap this up then. Anything else on this? We will all continue to be conscientious and alert to making it work at the meetings.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Next.
Another 30 minutes behind.
Yeah, really, this is gonna be a long one.
Well, that was the new business, so I don't think
All right,
Chris
so
Urza
we
was
don't
said
even,
200 new business.
yeah, we haven't had the DPW
You
presentation.
haven't had the report from the select board.
Select board
either.
presentation, please. Would you care to introduce yourself and feel welcome here? We are glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm Karen McShane from the bakery at the old hotel.
Nice.
I was watching this streaming and found it interesting, thought I'd come over. and
Good. Thank you.
observe.
Welcome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome to observe from in here.
Yeah,
Oh,
come.
I'm quite comfortable. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, selectmen's meetings updates. Start off with the biggest portion of our discussion, which was DPW. David presented a budget, which, are there copies anywhere around here? Or do you guys have copies of David's budget that he proposed? That's probably the bid.
This is the one Glenn sent us, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I have a copy.
So it came in at about 2.99% increase over last year. There was a lot of discussion, debate around the numbers for full-time labor. That kind of jumped, and it gave a lot of people in the room the opinion that there was another pay increase baked in there somewhere that we weren't seeing.
No,
Glenn,
I think they were more concerned about why there wasn't another increase in there, was the impression I got.
well, they were trying to figure out why it went from here to here, yet we were saying there was no pay increase.
Right.
Yeah. Glenn explained that as if you simply do the math, then 40 hours times X rate equals this. So that did take into consideration the pay increases that were in the budget last year. And if anything, the 82,000 that was in there last year was probably not an accurate number. Does that make sense?
That's
It
what
was
Glenn
too low or
said.
too high?
It was too low.
We've seen some others here that
Yeah.
aren't
Yeah.
accurate, yeah, probably aren't accurate.
So, at least from the selectmen's point of view, we understand where that's at. I think, and this is with some emails between the selectmen today too, I think we still want to feel more confident in those numbers for pay, for part-time pay, for overtime pay. Full-time pay is pretty much what it is.
I think Glenn's working on that, and
Yes.
Yeah.
he sent, I think he sent all of us the spreadsheet, but, and I had looked at it, he and I had talked, and I offered to look at it, and it was like, your eyes rolled after a while. I don't know if anybody else looked at it, trying to figure out, you get, somebody's up here, they're down here, and what's what. So Tom Dowling actually had a good suggestion, which I think Glenn had thought of before Tom threw it out, was basically put names on one axis and all the departments on the other axis, and then add them up, and you can see what the departments come to, whether it's mowing lawns or plowing snow or whatever they've got for line items, and then you can see what each person is making. And does it, make sense in terms of the overtime that's in there and what's, budgeted for their salaries.
My understanding of overtime is that most of it is done in the winter, and it's strictly a function of how many snowstorms we get. So when there's fewer snowstorms that last shorter time, not so much overtime.
True.
And when there's lots of snowstorms that last all day, a little bit coming down, there's more overtime.
Sure.
The other thing Glenn was talking about was trying to plan the plowing routes a little bit more around the bus routes, so that.
It's,
they
I
don't
think
come in
it's a
as
great
early.
idea.
But
Get the kids
it's already
already
done.
first.
It's already done, almost all of our roads. Almost all of our buses are on state roads. And when he has to plow the bus, he plows the bus roads first, and he has to start 3, whether or not. He doesn't know that school's gonna be canceled until 5:30 or 6, something like that, so he's already out there. So those are the ones he does first. Unfortunately, what the state not the state, excuse me, what the town has put out for what the bus routes are if you go on isn't actually what they are, which is a, so.
That's cute, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not bad, they're just a few little things so that it looks like you could do one thing, but in Canton, you can't. So there are just a few things to tweak. But the fact is, he does do those ones first, and we did suggest just holding off on the other roads until later.
Those are the types of things the select board would like to talk about. And how do you, I mean, this has been a challenge I've always had throughout my career, is how do I get all my work done with a set budget, and how do I reduce overtime? I've run retail/wholesale locations that were all hourly, and my workflow would go like this. It happens. How do you schedule people? How do you send somebody home in the middle of the day because you know you're gonna need them later, or you know that you worked them too much before and now I go home early, go home at 2 o'clock, things like that.
That's why I asked the question I did last night about what are you doing in the wintertime when you're not
Right.
plowing, because I know the place that I'm familiar with was the same thing. The guys had to be there to plow, and when, to try to cut the cost on the overtime, they try to plan around the snowstorms, and when they got their 40 hours in, if there wasn't any more forecast for snow, they'd send them home at the end of the, so they might not be there a couple of days in the pay period because they put all their hours in at another point, but they weren't getting overtime for that
Right.
kind of stuff, so.
So
The disadvantage of that, though, is that, the workers don't necessarily appreciate that in terms of their wallets, so.
well, especially around Christmas.
Mhm.
The other part of that is, and David rightfully so points out, that when those guys aren't doing plowing, there's a whole lot of maintenance to be done on trucks, and they are literally bathed in caustic chemicals, 3-4 months out of the year, and they need to keep them clean, they need to do those things. I recognize that, but I can never comprehend that somehow any group of people have figured out the absolute perfect method to do something in the most efficient way. And I don't care whether it's government workers or private business. There's gotta be some way that we can improve a little bit on that. Make a $2,000 dent in your overtime day. Take that as a challenge. I think that could probably be doable if you get creative with it,
Can we back up here a little bit
Yes,
to the select board meeting and specifics that,
okay.
and we will be talking more
Yeah.
about the DPW, but,
But that was the bulk of the conversation at the select board, at least as far as things pertinent to our budget goes. All in all, I threw out some cuts in budgets that weren't really cuts, because in at least the budgets that I had in front of me, we had never spent that much before. So if it said $5,000 and we'd never spent more than $3,000, how about moving that down to $4,000? There's $1,000 off of a budget. We can do that in a lot of different places throughout the budget. I'm trying to think of anything else that had a financial impact. The Friendly Meals Kitchen Sharing Program, just at a very high level. The town of Alstead owns the kitchen over here. Friendly Meals and the food shelf owns most of the equipment that's inside of it. You all, thank you very much, pay for the electric and pay for the heating of that building and all that good stuff. The idea is that we may contract that kitchen out to private companies who need a place to cook. So the example came up because I got a buddy who does barbecue, and he has to make thousands of pounds of coleslaw sometimes for a weekend, and his wife would rather not see that all over their kitchen. Is there a commercial kitchen he could go to? You talk to the people in Keene who used to run, what's the name of it?
Neighbor Maid.
Neighbor Made, a kitchen that people could go into and pay for use of it. The question is, could we do something like that here? The financial model would be, in some way, money would flow through or to the town through Friendly Meals. So in a sense, Friendly Meals would get some sort of donation out of it, and the town would get some funds to start offsetting the cost that we have of operating that building. That's the general idea, and if you're looking for more specifics, nobody's got them. A lot of people pointed out a lot of things that would need to be considered, like insurance, responsibility for cleanliness and standards for using the kitchen.
And scheduling.
Scheduling, when are they gonna be available, and, because other groups use that too, churches use that building too to cook turkeys and stuff like that. So, more to come on that at some point. Joel is gonna head up a small group of volunteers, and if anybody's interested in volunteering, we'd love to have somebody from this committee to again take a look at our health insurance costs. We're through Health Net, is that what it's called?
Health Trust.
Health
I
Trust.
think.
Thank you, you are correct. Who seems to be consistently the low bidder. The question is this an area we can look at alternatives? There are all sorts of different alternatives, from all the way from Obamacare to private members-only trusts that sort of self-insure their members. So is what we're doing today the best way we provide that benefit to our employees, or is there an alternative that makes more sense for everybody? So they're gonna be looking at that. If anybody's interested, contact Joel.
What's the current system called?
Health Trust, which I believe is just a standard insurance provider.
Right, it's-
They pool together various
Yeah,
municipalities.
different towns
Yeah.
join on this health trust and get a
Right.
better rate.
So instead of getting a 20 employee rate, you're getting a 5,000 employee rate, because we've got a bunch of towns to go together on it. A lot of people are skeptical whether they'll find a more cost-effective solution than that, but I'm glad they're looking at it.
Do you have any retired insurance executives in town?
I'm sure we,
Yeah, the Cosins.
Peter Cosin.
Peter? Yeah,
yeah,
They're your neighbors.
yeah,
So-
I was thinking more for an insurance company rather
Oh,
than an
okay.
agent, but yeah,
we
you're
we
right.
did agree last night that you cannot nominate anyone else other than a spouse. Spouses are immune to that.
That's called
Please
voluntold, not, according to my husband, not being volunteered, so.
don't. Yeah, voluntold.
Oh, come on.
I'm trying to think, cruiser lease is signed again. That was pretty much it, I think, that applies to budgets.
We were down a cruiser last week, from what I understand too, that Roger got asked to take care of something for Langdon and just, I guess, was able to borrow their cruiser for maybe a little longer than they'd anticipated, but, needed it because his was out of commission and then something happened to the other one, so.
Apparently Ford Motor Credit didn't print the pages they sent us correctly, so the signature blocks were not in their correct spaces. That delayed the cruiser by a week or two. That was pretty much it. And you can get your burn permits online.
Finally.
Yesterday.
You can, you said?
You can.
There's a
Small
cost.
cost.
Yeah, I'd like to say the hours of development I put into developing that system, but it turns out it's been there forever and nobody knew about it.
Was the pay-as-you-throw, I just started the
Oh, yes, thank
webinar
you.
before I left, but I didn't have time to see it all. Was
I-
that discussed at all?
A little bit.
Yeah, not much more than we,
I did, but
there are some
I'm
people
afraid
that
you
feel
spoke
that, I would say the minority feels that it's not worth looking at, and there are a lot of people, I think, that feel it is worth looking at again.
And the people who, last year when we discussed it, the consensus here was that pay-as-you-throw would make people throw in the woods.
and they talk about that in the webinar, more or less. They bring that up.
And was that what was concerning people?
There's a lot of arguments, I'm not gonna make people's arguments for them against this type of program. I can only speak for myself and say that I think a lot of the stories that we hear about the woods suddenly being filled with mattresses and TVs, it's probably exaggerated. And if the webinar talks about that, I'm sure
It
that's part of it.
does.
The
The guy
second,
from Concord said,
yeah, what I don't
There's no
wanna see
problem
is,
there.
what I don't wanna see personally is my total cost of getting rid of my garbage go up in any way. So if I start to buy my own bags, then I hope that my taxes, my contribution towards the transfer station goes down, so I think it's worth looking into. And we brought this up last year. I thought it was a good thing to talk about.
Well, you said some people were against it. What kind of arguments were they discussing
The
against it?
my main argument I heard was garbage in the woods.
That was it.
And
That's the big book.
I don't know if anybody said it, somebody tried it and it didn't work for them, but without naming it in particular.
There was I mentioned that there was a letter to the editor in the Shopper
Right.
about in Vermont. And they were having trouble with, like the thrift shop. All of a sudden, people were just dumping stuff there, and and the thrift shop then had to pay to dispose of it.
And Joel did comment that they've had a couple of, problems with that too.
We have that today without it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
without
I mean,
it, but that was
Um,
one that's true.
Donna, you may know more about this because you're on the Conservation Commission, but I know last year we happened to go down Camp Brook Road. Today they were doing the road cleanups and everything, and the stuff that had been dragged out of the woods, even with the trash system we have, was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know,
Furniture, TVs, the whole bit.
Camp Brook, because of the low population density,
Lends
seems
itself.
to be the place people go to dump crap.
Well, on Pratt Road, the,
Pratt Road?
the,
Where on Pratt Road?
right over the bank at the end of Pratt Road.
Well, now you've just given everybody an
Oh.
Alstead. Another location, Julie.
Guys, don't do it!
And Slade Hill too. No, it's wherever there's
Says
a
the
nice
camera
deep
there.
bank. It's wherever there's a good deep bank. But that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, we already have to pay for mattresses and we already have to pay for TVs. We can't call those
Yeah.
anything new or different
Because
because,
there are also free days for TV, for electronics, including televisions, once a year or something?
No, it hasn't been, they've
Well,
done
no,
it 3 days
No,
recently.
that
It cost too much last time.
Right.
Well, no, but
Well, I
she-
think we're
she
getting
had
into
one.
too much minutiae here on
Yeah.
this topic,
Right.
which is important, and we probably should
Yeah.
should
I,
really focus on it at some point, but.
from the select board's point of view, we recognize that you guys that were on the DPW subcommittee had your hands full just with the road piece and didn't look at that last year.
We
Maybe.
did look at it last year,
But-
and it was turned
We
down
wanted
because
to, and we
trash
actually,
in the
right.
Well, now it's back.
Oh, no, I just mean going into the minutia of the transfer station.
oh, okay.
But I think it's worth spending some
Looking at-
time on, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I think we should form another subcommittee when we have, when we have the manpower. Because you need to look at all sorts of different alternatives to encouraging recycling, not just one.
Well, and the webinar addresses that,
Right.
so everybody,
So
It's
why
become
don't we watch the
mandatory
webinar?
in Vermont now?
or tomorrow's okay.
Most Massachusetts does it, so there's lots of other states